I'm not quite sure why, but I've been receiving dozens, if not hundreds, of messages since the pandemic started asking me, how do I feel during this period? How am I reacting to what's happening? What's going on in my mind, etc., etc. I strongly suspect that what these very civil and polite people are trying to ask is, how does a narcissist react to all this? The irony is that the more narcissistic the world becomes, the less comfortable the narcissist feels. Narcissist is a predator. And of course, if everyone is a predator, there's no prey left. The competition on scarce, ever more scarce targets, ever more scarce sources of supply, and the growing self-awareness of these targets and victims and so on, makes the narcissist's life very difficult. I started this awareness movement in 1995. I was the first to describe narcissistic abuse. I coined the phrase narcissistic abuse. And in a way, I shot myself in the foot because I blew the whistle. I told victims what to look for, what to expect, how to beware, and how to protect themselves. And it could be described as a self-sacrificial act, but it wasn't, of course. Don't idealize what I've been doing. There's no need to, and I never pretended otherwise. But the fact is that the world today, our civilization, Western and Eastern, go to China, it's the same like the United States, if not worse. Our civilization, a global civilization, is utterly grandiose, malignantly narcissistic, and beginning to be, in many important respects, psychopathic. For example, defiance, lack of impulse control, lack of long-term consideration of consequences, inability to delay gratification, etc., etc., low tolerance for boredom. These are all psychopathic traits, not narcissistic ones. So we are becoming psychopaths. It's an ugly world, getting uglier by the minute. And again, paradoxically, this world is much more difficult for narcissists and psychopaths than for normal people. Because normal people can become narcissists and psychopaths. Narcissists and psychopaths have nowhere to go further. And their hunting grounds are narrowing down. When everyone is a psychopath, who do you abuse? Who do you victimize? Who do you steal from? Who do you rape? When everyone is a survivor, when everyone is self-aware, when everyone is onto you as a narcissist, who do you manipulate? Who do you brainwash? Who is there to provide you with supply? Who could you integrate in your shared fantasy? These psychopaths and narcissists are like the famous elephant in the African joke. You know, you divide Africa in half and divide it in another half, another. Finally, the elephant has to stand on one leg. And many psychopaths and narcissists are standing on one leg. It's a very, very inconvenient and uncomfortable, an inconvenient truth, an uncomfortable reality for narcissists and psychopaths. And what is happening is narcissists and psychopaths are upping their game. They're escalating. They're transitioning from regular, run-of-the-mill, pedestrian, quotidien, routine psychopathy and narcissism to very extreme variants, which border increasingly, in the case of narcissists, on psychosis, and in the case of psychopaths, on criminal conduct and worse, sadism. So we are seeing an escalation, radicalization of both narcissism and psychopathy. The narcissists I'm interviewing today from a database, they are like 10 times worse than the narcissists 20 years ago. And the damage they inflict on their so-called nearest and dearest is 100 times worse than anything they had done 20 years ago. And that's because they have to escalate to stand out. They have to escalate to survive, to ferret out, to hunt for, to acquire, to subjugate sources of supply, intimate partners for shared fantasies, etc., etc. And the same with psychopaths. I don't have a database of psychopaths, but I'm reading scholarly and other literature, anecdotal literature. I survey quite a few forums on a regular basis, and things are getting considerably worse. Things are really egregious and extreme today. The run-of-the-mill psychopath, the average psychopath in the 1940s, is described by Harvey Cleckley in his book. He was a drunkard, unreliable type. You couldn't trust his word, liar, didn't keep his promises, caused damage, no question. Fast forward to the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, there was a kind of guy who would steal money from you, con you, abscond with your pension fund, I don't know, run a brokerage house in Wall Street, or become the CEO, chief executive officer of some company. It was, your typical psychopath. Baby I Can Hear found psychopaths among chief executive officers of Fortune 500 companies in the 80s and 90s. It was the sociopath next door, to use Martha Stout's title of her famous book. That was 20 years ago. Today's psychopaths are out off the charts. They are out of these worlds. They are much closer to serial killers than to normal psychopaths. Not in the sense that they go around shooting people, although many of them do. Look at how the number of mass shootings, school shootings, the number has exploded, utterly exploded. There's a mass shooting daily in the United States. Actually, 1.5 mass shootings daily in the United States. It's also an indicator. But I'm not talking about this kind of psychopath who shoots around and kills people and so on. That's still, luckily for us, a tiny minority. But I'm talking about psychopaths whose the damage they inflict on society, on people around them, on their colleagues, on their wives, on their children, is becoming irreversible, traumatic to the extreme. Not the kind of damage that one can heal. Psychopathy is becoming toxic and pernicious to the point that it's a public health hazard. Not very dissimilar to the SARS coronavirus 2. And so I took time off. I took a break from the world between 2001 and 2016. Not many people know that, I think, because of my YouTube channel and so on. They think that I've been out there. But for 15 years, I stayed at home. I didn't socialize. I didn't meet anyone. The only times I went out were to participate in documentaries, or to give lectures. And otherwise, I stayed at home. And so it was a monastic seclusion, which lasted for 15 years. And then for personal reasons, in 2016, I re-emerged. I ended my self-imposed isolation, social distancing, seclusion, or some people say my imprisonment, my incarceration. Not my penance. Some people people close to me like to say that I've been repenting and doing my penance. That's projected nonsense. But the fact is that I've been alone. Well, literally alone, psychodynamically alone for 15 years. And then 2016, I re-emerged. And to my unmitigated horror and disorientation, I found that the world that I had left behind is gone for good. I couldn't identify a single thing I saw.